Okay, so welcome to the Truffles Therapy Podcast. Today I'm here with Jesse Gould, who is the founder of Heroic Hearts Project, which is a registered 501c3 nonprofit that connects military veterans struggling with mental trauma to ayahuasca therapy retreats. And yes, Jesse was in the military for 4.5 years. He was an Army Ranger. He did 3 deployments in Afghanistan, and when he came back, he was looking for healing, and he found an ayahuasca retreat, and everything changed for him after that. So, welcome to the show, Jesse.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So, yeah, could you give us a little background on the process? I mean, give us a little more detail on what I just said there, your history in the Army and what happened when you came back.
Yeah, of course. Like you mentioned, I was an Army Ranger. Had a few deployments. I mentioned to you before that fortunately I didn't come across anything personally extremely traumatic. Had very normal deployments, but fortunately nothing too crazy. But still, when I got back, I was suffering or struggling with a few things that I just couldn't figure out on my own, and I couldn't get past. And so on the outside, it looked as if things were going pretty well. Like I had a good job, had social life, I was trying to exercise, but there's still just something, some sort of dark cloud holding up, being over me, holding me back. Um, I was experiencing a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, drinking too much to cope with it. Just wasn't happy in any situation in my life, and so my experience is very similar to what a lot of veterans have, because there are, the phrase PTSD or whatever issues many veterans have is a very broad spectrum sort of diagnosis. And what we kind of view it is more of the Hollywood version, where you have this veteran that freaks out in like an aisle in the grocery store, or wakes up in the middle of the night with his gun and is ready to shoot somebody in his family. These very severe trauma-related cases, and there are those cases, but there are many veterans that are having these issues that are much more subtle, or you can't really point it to a certain thing. And so a lot of them don't want to associate with terms like PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, because of, the stigma of what I mentioned before. And so, within the veteran mentality, myself included back then, you're just like, I have a few problems. Everybody has some problems. I'll just deal with it. But I just finally came to a point where I knew it was holding me back in ways, and I just wasn't happy. I wasn't satisfied in my life. And so I had to figure it out. So I went to the Veteran Affairs, the mental health department when I was living in Tampa after I got out, and it was just there just wasn't that much help there. Pretty much, unless I was willing to take a variety of different medications, including like SSRIs, like antidepressant, anti-anxieties, there wasn't really much help they could do other than advise me to do a lot of the things I was doing, like exercise, write, meditate. So beyond that, they didn't really have any options for me, and I wasn't interested in taking SSRIs, just because, I've seen some cases where it really helps people, but I've seen many cases where it just makes them a shell of themselves, or just affects their life, and it doesn't treat the underlying symptoms. So it's kind of more of a masking kind of thing. And so for me, that wasn't very interesting. This is something I want to get over. I want to figure it out, and I don't just want to like mask it for the rest of my life. I'm still young. That's what they do. They teach you to cope with PTSD. And so, I came to it. I just continued on with my life. Eventually, I heard a podcast or in social media something about ayahuasca. I had very similar stigmas around psychedelics and ayahuasca and plant medicine as many people now, still to this day. And, immediately my reaction was it wasn't for me. I viewed psychedelics as just sort of this escapism, sort of this false, like, profound experience that doesn't really bring you with anything. But the more I read into it, the more it seemed different from my own stigmas, my own expectations, and I just came to that point in my life where I just decided, okay, I'm whatever I'm doing right now is not working, so let's try this thing that I would normally not try before. And so, I left my job. Fortunately, I was in a position where I paid off my debt and I had that ability, and I went to Peru and went to a reputable retreat. I emphasize that because a lot of people think you can just go to Peru and it's that easy. But do your research if this is a path that appeals to you. And I did my research. I found a place that does it safely and all this other kind of stuff. Went there and just almost instantly had my own very difficult but very profound experience. And it immediately it immediately shook all the stigmas and all the preconceptions that I had. It was much different from what I thought it'd be. And then just through the week while I was there, just seeing all these very amazing and very unique experiences of healing in a variety of different ways, and then just my own, just instantly made me realize that this was something different and there was something to this. So then I did more research, looked at there was precedent for it being used for PTSD, that there was medical evidence behind it. And then I started asking some friends, and when I started realizing what effect it had on me in terms of, nearly removing most of my anxiety and just really almost returning the momentum to my life, it just became clear that this is something that should be at least on more veterans' radars, more people's radars in general, but obviously my immediate group is veterans. And just a lot of people I serve with, I knew that this could potentially be something that could help them if they weren't if they weren't interested in the sort of the medication path. And so that's what spurred the start of Heroic Hearts Project about 2 years ago. Just that sort of mission of at least giving people the information around this so that they can potentially use it as a tool if it speaks to them. And so providing them with the information, providing them with the support to where if they decide to make this decision, they can do it in a safe, effective way. And so that's always kind of the evolving aspect of the foundation. And so our main mission is, if veterans come to us and fill out our application, we try to, and we select their application based off a few criteria, and we have donations to support them. We provide financial scholarships, we provide logistics support, we connect and verify retreats depending on their programs, and then we provide each veteran with a coach, integration coach, so it prepares them before and then follows up with them and makes sure that they really focus on the integration piece. And so a large aspect of it is ayahuasca, but we have connections with a few other centers and retreats as well. Just because we were talking about this before, there's a lot of psychedelics, and I do feel like in the future we'll realize that each one has its own spot within therapy or within a certain trauma. Maybe one's more effective than the other. Or just potentially that, each one speaks a little bit differently to each person because we're all a little bit chemically different. So, mushrooms might speak better to somebody, or it might fit better in their life at that time. And maybe ayahuasca fits better for somebody else. But right now we really focus on ayahuasca because it has an almost inescapable therapy aspect to it. But if somebody's more interested in something else, then we will work with our contacts and help them make that happen in the safest, easiest way possible.
Beautiful. So I'm not going to stop recording, but it's like a very it's like it's flashing the light sort of. I don't know what it is with the light or the camera or there's there a fan or something like that.
No, hold on. Should I?
It might be something with okay, sure.
Might be the light.
Yeah, we can cut this part. Yeah. No, I still see this. Do you see it on your end? It's like very like flashy,
Yeah.
blurry. Oh, see, then that's different. Yeah, wow. And that's different too. Yeah. See, that's much better. Why was it like that before?
Good.
What? Yeah, yeah, that's good. Okay, okay, yeah, we'll keep going.
I think it's just those like the light bulbs are just one of those that like
Right.
high
Yes. Okay.
twitch.
Okay, so yeah, we're back now. We got rid of the little flashing behind the scenes in the background. Okay, yeah, thank you. That's a very beautiful vision, and what an amazing idea this is. And what are the challenges you're facing now? What are the biggest obstacles in the foundation's growth right now?
So I mean, obviously the biggest one is just the landscape that all of us in the psychedelic community are dealing with and contending with, but it's actually starting to change and gain momentum, which is the general public perception and the stigmas around these, which has been propagated by the laws, obviously. And so, we would, in terms of doing this as the safest way possible and actually developing a therapy, like a more standardized therapy around these, it takes more research, it takes more trials, it takes more scientists looking into it and funding. All of that is not there and has been completely stopped because of the drug policies, the drug laws. So things like mushrooms and DMT and ayahuasca, they're all Schedule One controlled substances, and what that means down the line is that it's extremely hard, if not impossible, for anybody to study these in the university settings or most of the spots where these drugs are studied, there's just no funding for it. The hoops you have to go through to actually to start a study are just ridiculous. If you look into what it has taken MAPS to study marijuana, it's just ridiculous, and there's just a huge financial burden. All the hoops you have to go through are just crazy. So like with that case, once they got the approval, once they had to go through all those levels, then the only place they could actually get the marijuana was from one farm. That's the only authorized farm in the U.S. I think it's out of the University of Mississippi or something,
Mm.
and that's the only place they could get the marijuana to study. And the stuff that they got from there was just horrible quality with very little like um, analytical data behind it, and just it just pretty much made it impossible, but they still persevered. And so through that setting, it's just been very hard to promote research and all this other kind of stuff to change the minds of people, because that's really what it's going to take on one level of having that scientific support and prove that there is therapeutic potential here. And two, just it's been such a cultural sort of movement, as much as there's a cultural movement towards psychedelics in like the 50s 60s, and backlash, there's been a cultural movement against it. It's just been a very strong stigma to change people's minds. And so that's sort of our second goal, is through the veteran story, through the veteran cause. We really believe that is one of the strongest ways that we can start changing people's minds, internationally, but specifically in the U.S. Veterans in the military are very well respected. They're one of the most trusted groups in the U.S., and they're really hurting right now. They're in the U.S. specifically. There is a mental health crisis where a increasing record number of veterans are committing suicide every year. There's just record levels of PTSD, depression, homelessness, addiction at much higher levels in the general population. And this has been going on for over a decade. And any sort of new policy that has been enacted to try to combat this through the political system has just failed, and it's just all these levels have just increased, and they try to throw money at it, but it's just very misdirected, and the current therapy protocols just don't work. So through the VA, they have like less than a like 33% success rate in helping people with PTSD, whereas with something like the MDMA study, which is coming through the FDA through MAPS. They have like a 70 to 80% success rate, but yet still there's no government funding going to that because of the strong stigma around it. And so we're just really trying to share these veteran testimonials that are having this profound healing through substances like ayahuasca, and that will cause more people to sort of question their preconceived conceptions. Because if on one side they really support veterans and they want to do everything they can to help these veterans reintegrate into society and be healthy adults and healthy individual civilians. And on the other side, they're afraid of these substances that they don't really understand. If we can cause that question, I feel like that more people will fall on the side of, okay, let's research these and see how they can help this segment of the population.
Why do you think veterans end up with so many of these mental health issues?
There's a variety of reasons. The obvious is they're just put in this very unique, stressful situation for extended periods of time, and they're exposed to traumas that most people aren't equipped to really process in their minds. And so from a psychological level, there's that aspect of if you experience something very traumatic in terms of a death or somebody you know and love dying in your arms, or maimed body parts, what have you, it really sticks in your brain. And especially if it's prolonged periods of stress, it just throws off it really sticks. It just makes your amygdala fire way more, and it increases the stress levels in your brain, which throws off a lot of different stuff and just puts you in this very intense hypervigilant state. On the physical level, there's a lot of new evidence coming that veterans, especially who are exposed to a lot of concussive force or just general head injury, are much more susceptible to PTSD-like symptoms, which are depression, anxiety, hypervigilance, all that kind of stuff. So it's similar to what we're seeing with the National Football League in the U.S., where repeated concussive force is causing a high suicide and depression rate among NFL players. And so veterans, even because veterans are exposed to obviously explosions on a constant basis. I was a mortar, so there's just, our job was just to constantly shoot this rocket, which had a lot of concussive force on a daily basis.
Wow.
Just
that's traumatic. That's traumatic right there.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that's if you just picture it, like, even though it's not like a car wreck, you're still having this blast which shakes the brain. And if you don't allow the brain to heal, they form these like microabrasions that just build up over time. And so they're showing like there's a lot of relation to physical damage to these similar sort of psychological symptoms. And because one thing, it damages things like the hypothalamus and the pituitary, which then throw off hormone levels. And so you see a lot of these soldiers with hormone levels that are way far off for their age group. So that's another avenue to look. A lot of them just have kind of more of that spiritual or general way of life disconnect, because you go from the situation where you feel like you're doing something very important and you feel like you're serving a higher cause. And you're in this very unique brotherhood with people that you get closer to than possibly even your own family. And then when you get out of the military, all that's almost immediately gone. You'll keep up with your friends, but generally speaking, most veterans move away from their base, and time just kind of makes it very hard to keep up relationships. And then if you get caught up in this job, like a corporate job that you don't believe in, then you lose that sense of purpose. And so the issue facing veterans is very similar to the issues facing a lot of people. And obviously trauma is not exclusive to veterans, but in a lot of cases, it's almost just the same issues, just heightened for veterans, because we come from this very extreme situation where all these things happen at a much higher frequency and a much more elevated rate. And then we go to sort of the civilian world where it almost goes away. And so it's this weird contrast. And so that's really the hard part when we're helping veterans too, is helping them figure out which parts of their life are out of balance and how they can heal them themselves, in what ways ayahuasca can lead them to that or other psychedelics, what sort of work help them, support them on the reintegration phase afterwards, because that's, just as important as the actual ceremony of making the right choices when they return back to life. So, there's many different issues, and that's, again, why there needs to be the ability for people to research these, because it's very uncharted territory, and we're only now realizing that it's not just as easy as like, you have PTSD, here's your pill, you're going to be done. It's a multi-layered sort of diagnosis that you have to figure out per individual. And that's kind of the interesting things about psychedelics too, versus anything that you call medication, because medications are designed to hit very specific things. And if you and I both take a Tylenol, we're going to have very similar sort of effects. If you and I both go through an ayahuasca ceremony, more often than not, our experiences are going to be very different, very personalized. And so that's kind of the interesting things of how they interplay with psychedelics. But it can also make it hard, because I can't promise you, like, this is what you're going to see and this is how you deal with it.
Right. And you went to Cornell, which is an Ivy League university, and you graduated with the degree in economics. Why did you decide to go into the Army after working for a little bit there?
So I pursued banking for a very short time, like investment banking. And I liked it. I found it very interesting. There's just always something in the back of my head that was really intrigued by the military. It's such a, especially in American culture, it's such a almost backbone of American culture. And I just really wanted to understand it. And for me, there's just some sort of intuition that knew that this was a path I needed to take for my own development. And timing just kind of worked out, I guess, in my favor in many ways. Maybe not the way you'd expect it, but I graduated in 2009, which was during the huge financial crisis, and so New York was going crazy at that time. And I probably still could have pursued it, but it just kind of seemed like the right time, the right timing. It just became as it got closer, the idea just cemented in my head, and all the forces kind of pushed me towards that. And I'm very happy I did. A lot of the personal understanding and personal growth that I rely on today is as a result of that. It just really pushed me to certain levels that there's no way I would have been pushed in any other walk of life. And so the intuition that pushed me there was actually, I found all those feelings that I was searching for, oddly enough. And so it just kind of turned out to work.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And now, I mean, how did you change during the military? From when you entered, you had these ideas in your mind of what the military was like, and when you were in it, how did those ideas change, or did they?
Potentially, I don't know. I did a lot of research before I went to the military. And so, for instance, when I went Ranger, I made sure to get that in my contract, because I full on expected that, a lot of times the recruiters push you to just join even if you don't have something in your contract. And so for people who don't understand the military, it's when you sign up with a recruiter, you have like a general contract, and generally if you don't get any additions, you choose what job profile. So that's like infantry or radio operator or whatever. So whatever avenue you're going to. And then you go through that, you go through basic, and they send you where they need you. For certain cases, you can get something like the option to go through selection. So that's what I did for Ranger or Special Forces. And that doesn't make you a Ranger, but it gives you the path to try to prove yourself towards that. And so, I came in with the expectation that if I didn't have that, that the military would just throw me wherever they want, and that was probably pretty true. And so I already came in knowing the military is just this big bureaucracy, and you can't trust it to necessarily have your best interest in its mind. And if you accept that and you don't necessarily get frustrated, then if you kind of come into it with that pessimistic sort of view, then you can still get a lot out of it. You just have to know. It's like with anything else, you have to know what you're dealing with. And if you have all these like starry-eyed ideals, you're probably going to be disappointed. But like I said, I was seeking something about myself, and I found those challenges within it, just because I was prepared and I knew what I was getting into. No matter what, the military is a very weird job, for most people, especially in special operations. There's just times where you really love it, and there's just times when you just absolutely despise it. And it's this black and white, very extreme sort of world, and it's very hard to explain to anybody unless they experience it. And I guess I don't know, just in general, it just made me better understand this system that's important to many cultures, and just kind of how it works and what's realistic, what you view from the outside versus how it actually works on the inside, and just a different perspective on war in general. So it's hard to just outline it in bullet points, but just I guess a better understanding of how things work on a larger scale.
Yeah, beautiful. And since you started the foundation, what inner changes do you see in yourself? How has your mind changed? How have your ideas changed?
So since I've started my foundation, um, I mean, it goes hand in hand with when I first went to the ayahuasca ceremony. So, the changes that sort of promoted the start of the foundation were obviously a lot of the things I struggled with either went away, or I was just had a better understanding of them, so I was better able to work with them if they still reoccur. And that's a lot of it with ayahuasca and psychedelics is not necessarily that your anxiety is going to go away or your fear is going to completely go away, because those are normal reactions to life, but being able to reframe them, or being able to, when they come, work with the anxiety, work with these feelings, so it doesn't just completely control your life. That's a lot of the aspects coming out of it. And then just pursuing it and helping other veterans go through it, I guess it just gave me more nuanced understanding of the variety of traumas people are going through and just how complex it is. And I think a lot of people come from their first psychedelic experience thinking that it's going to instantly change the world, and all it takes is one person to take, or every person to take it, and then it's all done, and it's this magic pill. And I think fortunately I stayed mostly away from that, but there was that like, oh, this is great, blah blah blah, and I still think it's great, but I am much more focused now on the preparation and figuring out what works best with each person. So like with veterans I send now, and that's why I said it's an ever evolving process, is the veterans who fill out the applications, you can tell somewhat their personality types going into it. And I'm more inclined, there's some personality types that I just won't send, or some severe cases. One, because I don't have the infrastructure, but two, I believe that without close monitoring or very severe preparation, then the experience could potentially be harmful for them. And so I just have a better insight into that. Like there's certain veterans, if they have the personality that, whatever they need to do, they'll do it to get their healing. They've pursued a lot of other stuff. They'll go into this, they'll prepare it. They will continue to fight. They'll continue to work afterwards on the integration phase. Obviously, those are the people that are going to get the most out of it. The ones that are going into it with the more sort of Western perspective of, oh, give me this, I'm going to be done, everything's going to be solved. They're going to be in for a disappointment in some ways. And for those people, if they're expecting that disappointment can be harmful for them, because then they're just like, it sends them even further back. So just kind of understanding of all that, and just when you work with other people, especially on those on a therapy sort of side, it really helps you understand yourself better, obviously. And so just with each person, I kind of understand my own problems I still have, and that kind of stuff. So and that's with the veterans I send, I try to have them come back and help other veterans to help their own therapy. It's a pretty common thing that if you can continue on with what you're doing and help other people or teach other people, you get more out of what you're going through.
Right. You get what you give, for sure.
And it brings people back to, like I was saying, for some people, it's that missing sort of sense of importance. And a lot of veterans especially find healing in that regard through dedicating their lives to other people, other veterans, through nonprofits. That's a pretty common thing. There's quite a few veteran nonprofits, and I think it's because of that. They're trying, they came from this life where they really felt that they're doing something important for a bigger cause, and to lose that is very hard to deal with. And so volunteering and through these nonprofits, I think, is a good way for anybody if they're feeling that lack in that regard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally agree. And besides volunteering, how should people integrate after their psychedelic experience? What have you seen works best with people?
So, that's part of the reason we set them up with integration coaches, and I'll follow up with them. We're still a small organization, so it's not like we're sending thousands of people at this point. It's still, an occasional group, so I can follow up with them. During the ceremony, we specifically emphasize that they take notes and journal and really sort of get into tune with what they're going through, and figure out, what's, just because they feel like this is the path that they need to heal. Oftentimes psychedelics show them that it's actually something else, or maybe they need to figure out a layer before they can get to the deeper layers. And so maybe there's future healing, that's all on them to decide. But really figuring out what lessons they got out of this particular retreat, these ceremonies. And so that's, from the get-go, note-taking, really getting in tune with your emotions, all that kind of stuff. A lot of people will come with these, feeling on top of the world, these great ideas. So one, just kind of slow them down, just because it's a very common thing right after ayahuasca, people wanting to make dramatic life changes. And you want to kind of give it a couple weeks so you're not just, changing up all your life on kind of a whim. Mm-hmm. And so it's taking the time, analyzing those powerful thoughts and see where they're coming from, and then seeing if they're actually good ideas. Mm-hmm. Other stuff that people are motivated to do, like stop drinking or start exercising. Sorry. Those things are easy and they can start right away. A lot of people start eating proper diets. And so then it's really on those kind of things, have them focus on that, have them focus on how it makes them feel and how it's changing their life, and really support them into maintaining those decisions, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's part of how a coach can help, because it keeps us accountable, because we're much more likely to do it. And, maybe suggest ways that it's a little bit more attainable. So obviously it's kind of like with diets. Most people can't stick to a diet because they'll miss a cheeseburger. They really want to eat a cheeseburger. And so if they just cut that out completely, eventually, their mind's probably going to convince them to eat it. And so it's just, finding a diet that actually works with your life, that you can maintain, whether that's just lowering your food intake or having some sort of discipline. And then just giving them different tools depending on their personality to really stay in touch with themselves, their emotions, what they're feeling, and help them, remind them of the tools they learned during the ceremony. So, and that a lot of that's preparation as well. So no matter what, and this is part of the integration phase, when you come back to life, life is going to happen. So there's still going to be bad stuff. There's still going to be anxiety. There's still going to be all this kind of stuff. And if somebody's not prepared, if they're still on this cloud nine from ayahuasca, and all of a sudden something bad happens, it can make them go directly back to their depressive state or to their anxious state and almost be worse because it's the contrast from how high they were feeling to how low. And so it's really preparing them to expect that, and if it does happen, what are the tools they learn? And so it's really a sensitivity of understanding these emotions, where they're coming from, what's triggering them, and when they do hit, almost taking like a third person perspective of it, of like, oh yeah, when I'm in this situation, I'm feeling really anxious right now. Okay, this will pass. This is caused by this. In the future, I'll prevent that. So just kind of small changes, but really just helping them be more in tune to themselves. Mm-hmm. On the contrast, I've seen people that get a lot out of their ceremonies, but when they go back home, they just instantly go back to partying. They go with that same group of friends. They go to these patterns in their life that they're almost addicted to. And that's really how a lot of people need to look at it, is they are addicted to this. They're addicted to this social group. They're addicted to this nightlife. And sometimes you have to make those hard choices. If a certain party group of friends or something like that is hurting your life and causing you to go into these bad states, maybe you need to limit your time with them or change your social scene altogether. Because if you go right back into drinking and you go right back into, occasionally it's fine, but if you go right back into your old ways, how are you going to expect to improve,
Right. And you're going to fall right back into those depressive states that was the reason why you went to the ayahuasca retreat,
Exactly. And so it's really a full, like I was saying before, it's a full lifestyle change. And that doesn't mean you have to just be, like a monk in the mountains. Right. You can still have fun and you can still do it, but it's being conscious of what your triggers are.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And a lot of it is environmental, right? When we're in the same group of friends with the same social cues and the drinking or smoking, whatever, it's natural for the body just to lose its will and to conform to its environment. So yeah, a lot of it, we hear this all the time, and you're the product or you're the sum or the average of the 5 people you spend the most time around. And it's really true. If you go back to the same group of people, you're going to fall right back into how you were before.
Yeah, I mean, we form these characters of ourselves because we all want to fit into social groups. And so if you look at your social group, there's always the person that's the funny one or the person that's the awkward one. And even if you're in different groups and you find a different character, the moment you go back to your high school group, you'll find yourself falling right back into those patterns. Right. And it's not bad, but you also have to be cognizant of it so it doesn't make you make bad choices.
Right. Yeah, totally. Yeah. And so, yes, how can people help? Where can people find you?
So the website is heroicheartsproject.org, and there's a donate button right on the top where you can do /donate. Whatever, even if it's just a couple dollars, that's a tremendous help. We also have a Patreon. It's pretty much Patreon /Heroic Hearts Project, and that's better for the people that just can only donate $1 or $2. And just on our website, you can follow us along. We have Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. They're all just search Heroic Hearts Project. So whether you can donate money, which is very helpful, or just sign on to our newsletter and follow along, all that's very helpful. What we always find is, people feel like even a small amount's not worth donating, but it is. The more, even if we just get a bunch of people that donate $1 or $2, that's a tremendous help, because the more media we get about, if it's a popular podcast, we'll get about 10 to 15 more vets that need help, and from that we'll only get a few individuals that are donating. And I know there's a lot of things drawing people's attention and money, but if this really speaks to you, we could really use the help, because the more we have that, the more our ability to send veterans. And 100% of the money goes to the veterans or sort of the studies we're doing. And so one that we're doing this summer is a gut microbiome study. So we're testing the effects on the personality of the veterans before and after ayahuasca, and how that relates to their gut microbiome, changes in that as a result of ayahuasca. So, we're just constantly doing these and exploratory studies to just push all these aspects forward in whatever way we can. And that's really, in my belief, the best way we can change the stigmas around this and potentially change the policies as well.
Beautiful. Great. Yeah, Jesse, really appreciate your time and thank you for sharing. And we'll get this on in the next few days. And we'll definitely stay in touch, Jesse.
Yeah, definitely. We have a few big events coming up soon, and I'd love to be back on down the line and talk about how they go and when we release the study as well.
Sure. Sounds good. Really appreciate your time, Jesse.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.